Welcome back to Control Alt Lead, the podcast from computing where we talk to IT leaders about what is moving in the market. Instead of sticking to our normal fortnightly schedule, we've released this episode a week early. The reason for which will be apparent as soon as you hear what the topic is. So it's January, which means everyone is recovering from a busy end to the year, especially the retail sector. My guest this week is Mattie Toia. They're the VP of Infrastructure. They're the VP of Infrastructure at Shopify, the company that helps brands sell online without having to build their own e-commerce system. Now, most retailers have a peak period at the end of the year, but when you're at a company like Shopify, in charge of online sales for millions of storefronts, the peak period is on a whole other level. In this episode, Mattie and I talk about infrastructure, reliability, and resilience. We dive into Shopify's prep work for the peak period, and there are some great insights into the nuts and bolts of what that actually looks like. We also finally answered the big question, the one on everyone's lips, out of Black Friday and Christmas, which is the bigger peak? Enjoy. All right. Right, so Mattie, thank you so much for joining me today. You've come from Shopify. Shopify's name is pretty ubiquitous, but I think a lot of people will probably be wondering, I know Shopify, but where do I know the name from? So can you just give us a little bit of background on what Shopify is, what you do, and why people will know your name?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here today. Shopify really is kind of like the brand behind the brand in a lot of ways. It's an all-in-one global e-commerce solution. We work with merchants all over the world to help them bring to reality the storefronts that they want to provide to the buyers and customers that they have, but allow them to really have their brand first, to really put first their own vision for how they want their business to be run. And our ideal here is to make commerce better for everyone. Shopify is a platform with services engineered for speed, and delivering a really great experience is, at the end of the day, what we're here for.
So obviously it's January, we've just come out of peak sales time, starting with Black Friday, of course, going all the way through to Christmas. Uh, Shopify, being an e-commerce company, I imagine has quite a lot to do in that peak sales period. So what does that end of the year period look like at Shopify?
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting, particularly seeing the way the world has changed year over year. Black Friday really started as kind of more of an American type retail holiday. But over time, we've seen it become a global phenomenon. And I think Shopify's had a lot to do with sort of helping brands really deliver on a great retail experience for like that shopping period itself. And while we focus a lot about the month itself, our preparations for Black Friday start at the very beginning of the year. I'm already in January having conversations about what we learned from Black Friday this past year, what we want to do for this upcoming year, and beginning to start thinking about things like how we're going to test the scale of our systems over the course of the year, so that when the big day finally comes, we're very confident and ready for the kind of traffic that we're going to see.
Okay, so
My background is in infrastructure, so I think a lot about capacity. I think a lot about the scalability of the products that we make. I think a lot about the kinds of traffic we're going to see and where in the world we're going to see them. And so processing all that data is a big job to do.
yeah, scale must be a real sticking point for a company like yours in that period and in the lead up to the period as well.
Yeah, that's right. Most most of our merchants that are really having serious Black Friday related sales or promotions start thinking about them almost 180 days before the actual Black Friday itself. And more, we're seeing our merchants do sales or have particular retail events for their brands in the lead up to Black Friday. And so we're thinking about that scale problem year round, of course. But what makes, I think, Black Friday particularly special is what I call the peak of peaks, right? It's one thing to have one particular store doing a really big sale. It's very different when every store on the platform, or many of the stores on the platform, are all having that same really huge moment at the same time. It's very exciting, of course. It's always a record breaker, which is also a really interesting part of my job in infrastructure. But yeah, that's really the challenge. And what it comes down to be honest, is to just have a really good understanding of our systems and really good observability into the data that makes up our infrastructure, because that's fundamentally how we think about forecasting and preparation to make sure that we're going to be ready, even when we're breaking records.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question. How are you ensuring that you have that sort of really high reliability, that high, resilience that will stand up to this peak of peaks period?
That's a really great question. Resilience is the right word. I like to use that word when I talk about this particular problem, because there are things you can plan for, and then there's also just the great unknown of things that you didn't expect or that were hard to imagine could have happened. Um, and so resilience is really about the sort of dynamic response that you have, both the things that you plan for and being ready for them, but then also sort of the what do you do in case something happens. In addition to all the preparation we do in terms of acquiring capacity and getting reservations in place to make sure that we're going to have both the expected amount and plenty of buffer for additional unexpected load. We also do a lot of things called game days, where my team will sit with other parts of the Shopify organization. We'll discuss ways that software may fail or experiments we want to run to see how software may break under certain situations. Run generated load that simulates the kind of traffic that we will see on Black Friday and see how our system actually behaves as it is deployed, not just on paper, but like actually running through what will happen in production. And by going through these scenarios, you actually learn a lot. After we do them, we sit down and do a retrospective with the engineers on the team to go through point by point all of the things that we observed during the particular game day or the event, and then feed that into the development process, because really it is a cycle, right? When you're doing this kind of engineering at scale, you have to make sure that you're building in resilience to the design of your system upfront, not just as an afterthought. And since the software cycle never really ends, there's always the next product, the next feature, the next development that you have there. It needs to be part of that loop as to like, okay, when we think about the next thing that we build or the next enhancement that we want to build, how do we build into that design the scale that we've learned from all these experiences that we've had, both practical from past Black Fridays, as well as experimental for things like game days or load tests and simulations that we do.
Great. Now, I've got to ask, because I've always wondered, which is the bigger peak sales period? Is it Black Friday, or is it sort of that whole lead up to Christmas?
That's a great question. What I'll say is this: Black Friday is still the biggest online day that we have. Cyber Monday is right there behind it. But that Saturday before Christmas is a huge day for retail. And you might not know this, but in addition to being an online storefront, Shopify has a point of sale system. And so we have a lot of our big merchants that have in-store retail days on that Saturday before Christmas, which are just, huge peaks, record breakers for them. And also when we look at our own retail, in-person retail, like record breakers for us as well. So, I said at the end of Black Friday this past year in 2024, yeah, we're gonna have a small celebration about the success there, but it will be a bigger celebration after we get past Christmas holidays. Because commerce never really sleeps, right? It's a global company. We have this big event with Black Friday, but there's all sorts of other things that happen. I mean, even Boxing Day is a pretty significant retail holiday and growing as well. So we can't just turn off the lights and hang up our coats once we pass Black Friday. We're always thinking about those next things. But yeah, really the biggest still is Black Friday right now.
Yeah, of course. And you have things like China Golden Week and then other peak sales
Exactly.
periods
Yeah.
all around the world.
Singles Day is another big one that we've seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So, um, I know that this year you had a visualization tool, like data visualization tool, to track sales around the world, and I'm really interested in hearing more about that because I find data visualization absolutely fascinating. So, how does that work, and why did you launch this tool to let people, see sales in 3D in real time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We call it the globe, right? It's the Shopify globe. And we have an internal representation of that merchants can see for their own storefronts that's kind of accessible in the administrative panel. Now, it's not as fancy as the one that we put out this past year, which had full 3D rendering and lots of additional stats on it, in addition to a visualization as to where sales are coming from and the volume of traffic that we're seeing. But it all started as just a way to visualize one merchant's days, sales that were happening. And over time, it's grown and grown into something that we can really use to showcase the kind of power that commerce can have, not just powering individual brands, but like commerce as a whole around the world. And each year we think about ways that we can bring new technology to the way that we do that visualization. How can we make it something that people can engage with? And how can we make it have features that are discoverable for the folks that, might be developers themselves or might be engineers themselves and want to see a bit more behind the scenes as to what's going on inside of Shopify. So we had things like Numbers for Nerds, which include stats about what's going on in our databases, what's happening in our network, on our edge, how much data are we serving up, to kind of give sort of an understanding of not just the scale of the transactions, but also the scale of the technology behind the scenes. Ultimately, Shopify being a platform means that we engage with a very large developer community. We have a lot of products that are specifically for developers. There's a very active body of developers that build apps for Shopify as their own business. And then many merchants have very sophisticated storefronts that they've done intense customization with. It's all possible. We try to make that part of the product that we build. And so that means that we do have an opportunity to engage sort of at that technical level with folks.
That's an impressive level of transparency.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important when you're working with other technologists to have that kind of transparency. We talked about resilience. I think another big part of resilience is being transparent and honest, because you can always learn from each other. And so I kind of, in my mind at least, view part of why we do this as being transparent with not just our customers, but really the world as a whole. Yeah.
Great.
But
okay,
so the globe is all real time too. Like we actually have systems that do streaming of events as they're coming in to Shopify, and so we pipe that same stream out to get to all of the web browsers that are showcasing the different facts and figures there, whether it's traffic numbers that we have, the numbers of the GMV that's being displayed on the globe, or things like what are the trending products that are happening. All that's being based off of real-time streams of data. So if you saw the live feed we had from the Las Vegas Sphere this past year, it was literally live. Like if you opened your web browser at the same time and looked at the Sphere standing in Las Vegas, you would have had same. It would have been the same on your phone as it would have been in there, which that took some doing. It took a lot of infrastructure to build it, but it was really a great moment to see that we could be that real time and present with the kind of traffic and data that we were getting.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I suppose then my other question, because this plays into everything you've just talked about, is Shopify's work with AI, because it's the big news on everybody's lips. And you are dealing with massive amounts of data. So I just wonder where you're bringing artificial intelligence into this.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that I think AI is affecting every business, and so Shopify is definitely no exception. Of course, as a software company, we're using AI in our development process. We have a lot of AI tools and features that our engineers are leveraging every day to try to help make the vast amount of code and the complexity of the systems that we have more manageable and faster to iterate on. That has been huge. But sort of like what's happening on sort of the front of the scene that people are seeing, Shopify Magic is bringing a lot of the features that AI can have on like creating a better and more productive or more profitable store to our merchants. The way that we have our admin set up, when you want to build a store, there are assistive technologies that are based on AI that help our merchants actually build their storefront, build the pieces of their online presence that are actually going to be relevant to them, and in a way that doesn't necessarily require deep technical knowledge of esoteric languages or something like that. that assistive tool has been really powerful. We've also brought that Shopify magic to things like the inbox, where you communicate with your buyers as a merchant. If you have a very popular store or you have a particularly hyped item, you might need ways to scale your staff. You might not have a huge staff when you have a popular store or popular item. And things like leveraging AI in those contexts can really be helpful to help you manage what could otherwise be an overwhelming type of correspondence. So it's features like that that are coming in that are providing a lot of assistive technology to our merchants and the way that they can actually build their stores better and more effective.
Cool. Mattie, we're almost out of time, so I'll ask you one more question. Are you expecting another record-breaking year in 2025?
This is an easy one. Of course I am. Yeah. I was reflecting about this, and I think that that's what always keeps this job so exciting. Commerce has been around for much of history, right? Whether it was way back in time, people traveling and trading between towns and in different regions in the world, to what we have today in terms of the e-commerce presence that everyone has been moving to, particularly after the pandemic. We saw such a move to doing online business, even if you have a brick and mortar presence, to do serious online business. And having something as fundamental as being able to trade, to perform commerce as the core of what Shopify is working with means that there's so much opportunity for growth in the future, so much opportunity to continue to change the way that people interact, not just buy things, but interact. And that means that there's so much more to do. And I think that really is exciting for me as someone who builds, exciting for me as someone who works at Shopify, and hopefully exciting for folks listening in who might be entrepreneurs or merchants themselves or developers who are working in e-commerce. So I do expect another record-breaking year in 2025, but perhaps we can chat in the year from now and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll look forward to catching up with you this time in 2026, which feels like an insane date to talk about right now.
It seems like an insane date, but like I said at the beginning of the interview, we start thinking about it now because it's just an important time of year.
Absolutely. Mattie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. And hopefully we'll get to connect again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to this episode of Control Alt Lead. Coming up in the season ahead, we'll have interviews with IT leaders at PA Consulting, British American Tobacco, THG, Oracle, and many, many more. As always, head over to computing.co.uk for more IT leader interviews, research, and analysis. See you soon.